Hey everyone, today I am talking with superhuman and inspiration Leah Goldstein. Leah is probably the most inspiring lady you will ever hear speak. She has done so many amazing things in her life. The race across America, 3,000-mile bike ride. She's the first lady ever to win that. And, well, she was the world kickboxing champion at age 17. And she was also in the Israeli Special Forces. This lady is phenomenal. You have to hear her story and her energy and passion. She knows no limits and no quit. She doesn't know what quitting is. And when you hear her story and you hear her speak, she's going to set you on fire. Guys, buckle up. This is the Original Strength Podcast. Leah, you're like a real live superhuman action hero.
I
It,
don't know about
I don't know. Like I just watching your story and reading your story. I don't know that I didn't even know people like you existed.
over here.
You are
Yeah.
here. So if you don't mind, I'll just ask you some like I just want to figure out how you got to be how you are. Because you're
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you.
So when you were a child, I read that you wanted to be like Bruce Lee.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to be James Bond, but I had to be Bruce Lee first because I was bullied at school, right? Because I spoke with a lisp. My English wasn't good. My mom was born in China, my father in the Soviet Union. They came to this country, to Canada, with very little grasp of the language. So I got bullied because of, when you're different in school, what happens? It's not a pleasant environment. So you know, I couldn't tell my parents, couldn't tell the teachers. So I saw Bruce Lee on television and I saw, damn, he's fighting all these guys and he's tiny. He was like my size. So I said, oh, I got to do whatever he's doing. So that's how I kind of got into the Taekwondo. And once I was a second degree black belt, I mean, nobody touched me, right? So, and not that I fought, I didn't have to fight, right? So
But you didn't just become a second degree black belt. You actually became the world kickboxing champion at age 17.
correct. Yes. When I was a second degree black belt, I was a junior national champion at 12. And I got red carded a lot for too much contact. Now, I was good at my skill because my father was the national champion in Israel in the sport of boxing. So I grew up watching boxing with my father. So he's very animated. He showed me the way they stand, the way they move. So you mix taekwondo and boxing and you get more of a kickboxer. And that's kind of how the whole sport started because I was looking for more of a challenge. And that's how the birth of my kickboxing started.
Wow. So did how when you were in school and you first started getting bullied until you were 17, like how many years was that?
Well, when I was in high school, actually, when I was training for the world championships, I basically went into a kickboxing studio and I had this big head because I was a second degree black belt, undefeated. But Taekwondo is much different than kickboxing. It's night and day, it's very traditional. So the coach there wanted to teach me a lesson. So he put me in the boxing ring with one of his best skilled kickboxer and he beat the crap out of me. You know what I mean? And so, just kind of to bring my head down to earth, right? To bring me down to earth. And he basically said he saw skill there. And the coach, Alan Chang, he said to me after he watched the way I moved and my skill as a martial artist, he said, you train hard here and you listen to me, 17 years old, you world champion, because English wasn't very good, right? And then I was hooked. The first day I walked in, that's what he said to me. And so that's how I made the transition. And I learned at that very young age, like, what does it take to be the best at everything, at anything you want to do? And that's 110%. It's really lasering in. And, I didn't have those, teenage parties, a lot of friends, or the high school experience because I actually ended up taking correspondence, like homeschool, in order to train, 3 times a day. But my result was 17, as he said, 17 years old. I was the undefeated champion of the world.
So you hit the mark, the target. I mean, you were dead on it.
I was dead on. Yeah. I mean, I followed every little thing he said and I dedicated my life to that. I mean, ate, breathed, slept kickboxing and training because it's a very, like, I know cycling is hard, but you know, you can kind of let up when you're cycling or running or doing, but if you do that in kickboxing or boxing, you're going to get your head pounded, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be very good skill wise, physical wise, mental wise. So it was a tough challenge and putting it, a 12, 13-year-old kid into that regiment of training it develops you into a strong adult, and realizing what you can do with that kind of dedication into anything else you apply yourself to. And that's kind of how what I did and everything else I did, right, is lasering in 110%.
So, okay, so how did you go from that, which is amazing, just that alone, that's that one thing, and then you decided to transition and join the Israeli Defense Force?
Oh, I wanted to do that since I was 7 years old. That was my dream. Like when I say James Bond, I wanted to work for the intelligence, right? Because I mean, members of my family are involved in that type of work, and everything was kind of a secret in my family. My parents told us don't say anything on the phone, so we're kind of almost like they're breeding us or grooming us to do that type of work, right? And we went every year back to the Middle East, and that was just my dream. I was going to do, join the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, and then from there transition into the police department and hopefully work something in the intelligence department. And that's exactly what happened.
And and when you were in the Defense Force, you became the first female instructor, right? The
Commando, yeah,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, because it was a selection base, right? Like they take about 360 soldiers that have a unique skill or something they think they might be able to use different departments. And from that 360 of us, they narrowed us down to five, and I was part of that five. And in that five, we were gonna be sent to different intelligence bases throughout the country. And I actually went to a training base called Base 8, where a lot of the intelligence departments, not only in Israel, but in the United States, in Canada, all over the world, they come there for training. And because, my first language is English, I mean, for foreigners that came in, I trained them. And also, again, like you said, I was the first female instructor to train the commando.
With your fighting background, Taekwondo and kickboxing, was it easy to transition into Krav Maga?
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's the department. Actually, I failed to mention that. That's the department that picked me up, Krav Maga. Because Krav Maga, it's a Hebrew word, means lethal hand combat, right? So that's what they did, is because I had all the skill anyways, right? But it's a little bit of transitioning to more military style type of training, and how to use, if your ammunition jams, how to use it as a secret weapon or a lethal weapon, or a stick, a rock, a stone. So I got to learn a lot too, but I had the skill, right, of the fighting skill and the reaction and all the stuff that's needed to perfect that type of training.
You hit your goal of becoming James Bond too, but it sounds like you were a lot more dangerous than James Bond was.
I don't know about dangerous, right? But the interesting thing too is when we talk about Krav Maga, because a lot of it's funny. I had another conversation with another actually Marine guy, that in Israel when they went there, the best soldiers, they weren't the ones that were 6'7" or 7 feet, or the big, burly guys. They were the small petite ones, right? That they were the most unique. And also, even in training, I always thought, the smaller guys are going to get demolished. But with Krav Maga, it's based more on skill than strength, right? Because you can still be very dangerous being very small, right? So there's a unique skill to that and a science to that. So it's very interesting when you see the two in different countries, the difference, like dimensions of people and how they look and how they react and how they train. So size has nothing to do with it.
How many years were you in the Israeli special forces?
Well, I transitioned to the police department, and then to an organization called the Bilush, which was a spying agency. So I basically left that whole era when I was 31.
Okay.
That was, yeah, it's about 12 years.
And then is that when you picked up bicycling?
That's
Cycling?
when I got this crazy idea that I want to become a pro cyclist. Yes, because I was actually introduced to the sport of duathlon in the military. There was a lieutenant there who was the national champion in the sport of triathlon, and he always saw me training. So he goes, "Oh, let's just go for a bike ride, right?" And I thought, I didn't really want to go, but I didn't want to say no. So I hopped on an old clunker piece of garbage bike I had, and I actually really got into it. I really liked it. And I went to it was my first duathlon, and I didn't know how to warm up even. So how we warmed up, my commander came with me. He took out a pair of focus pads, and I started punching. That was warming up for this triathlon, right? Or this duathlon, sorry. That kind of escalated from there, and I ended up winning. And it wasn't because of the run. I mean, I was a good runner, but not a great runner. It was the bike leg, and that's what I loved. It was, that's how I kind of started to fall in love with the bike, was starting from that first competition.
And I mean, you were really good. Like you got picked up for the Tour de France, right?
Well, not right away. It took me a while, right? Because, like, listen, in Israel, I was a big fish in a small pond, right?
Ah,
When I left and I came back to North America, I got my ass handed to me on a platter, right? Because well, I excelled pretty fast in Canada, but cycling, the birth of cycling is really in Europe, excuse me, right? So, I mean, Europeans, that's their sport. It's like the hockey of Canada, or the football in the United States, right? Cycling is everything. So I think, when kids are born, they learn to ride before they learn to crawl. So when I was picked up as a development rider for the national team, I mean, it was night and day. It's like a whole new different sport. The level they were untouchable. But when you stay there long enough, you start to train like them and you have that competition and you start, the gap starts to close. So that's where I got really good, is when I went to Europe and got demolished, and then learn, and even coming back here after Europe, I dominated in North America. So obviously they were doing something right. So that system of training kind of came into North America, and that's how cycling now in North America, United States, and Canada, we've now reached levels of the European riders because we've implemented the way they train.
yeah, I hear you. Like I know they were doing something right training, but you seem to have this track record of just zeroing in on goals and reaching them anyway.
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, I struggled in cycling, right? I mean, it took me, my God, I had the best years on the bike in my late 30s, right? But it took me like a good 7, 6 years to finally get there. And for me, it's like, that's the thing, is when people, like, they fail, they almost like always throw in the white towel, right? I'm done, right? But for me, I take it as a challenge, right? Like, I don't care how long it takes. If you laser in on something, you'll get there. It's just a matter of having the will and the guts not to let it tear you down. And I think that's always been implemented in me, right? Is that quitting should never be your option unless you're going to die, or it's deadly or whatever. But I've never quit anything, and I don't know what quitting is like, and I don't know what it's like. I don't want to feel what it's like.
And so speaking of that, and can you talk about your bike accident that happened in 2005?
Oh, I've had many bike accidents. Oh yeah. I mean, that was, I think, based on Velo News, which is one of the biggest cycling magazines in the world, it was one of the worst crashes in the history of the sport at that time, minus people who have died. I was at a big race in Cascade, sorry, Bend, Oregon, and a lot of Europeans were there. It was an international field, and we were descending. And as we, on those bikes, we can go up to 100 plus kilometers an hour. And as we were descending, like the peloton is just a group of riders. That's what you
Right.
call it, peloton. So as we're in that tucked position, there was a road closure rule that if we can't go over the white center line. So as we're descending at about 85 kilometers an hour, a rider came in and she didn't want to touch that center line, and she kind of lost control of her bike. So she leaned into me. And at 85, I landed on my face, right? And I basically, I had instant facelift. It was not good. I mean, my lips ripped off, my arm was dislocated there from the friction of the fall, clothes burnt off, first layer of skin. I broke all my ribs, my hips, my legs, my arms, my fingers,
Oh
toes.
my
I mean,
gosh.
it was like taking a pretzel and stepping on it. That's how it was. And I remember coming in and out of consciousness, holding pieces of my face because it was, you know what I mean, my lips. So that was, yeah, like I said, that was the mother of all crashes, right? And well, I'm lucky
Yes.
I'm here. So,
Yeah,
but it was,
you're a
yeah,
miracle.
yeah, I mean, that was a miracle because the diagnosis wasn't good. They said it was questionable about my ability to walk properly without a walker or a cane, but it was unquestionable that I'd never get back on my bike and race again. And that's kind of what I was left with, right? And, it's the unknown. So you can imagine being from what I was to where I was at that point. It could be a very dark place, right? But you
How
get through it.
how long did it take to, and this is, I know this is broad, but like to recover, like in the hospital, but also to get where you could walk again, you could ride again. Like what was that time frame like?
Interesting because they told me, I mean, they probably said I could, be somewhat functional in they gave me about a 3 year timeline, you know what I mean? Which I think was a mistake. But as soon as I opened my eyes, and I was bedbound, by the way, I couldn't move. I said, "Oh, I'm getting back on that bike." And the only thing I could do, honestly, was contract my abs. That was the only movement I could do. But every day I could move a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Finally, when I was on a wheelchair, I started wheeling around the hospital. You know what I mean? Like they couldn't. And I'd be so exhausted, I'd fall asleep in the hallways. I'd wake up and I'd wheel a bit more. So I mean, I was working my butt off every day. Every day I did something like today that I couldn't do the day before. And believe it or not, I was race ready back on my bike that next season. So, I mean,
Really?
I wasn't fully recovered. Like physically, I could do it, but it was the flashbacks mentally that was the biggest challenge, right? So I
Right.
worked really tightly with my coach. It was especially the descending, because you don't break when you're cycling as it, but I was breaking all the time and I couldn't be around anybody. So that was more of a challenge than the physical part.
Right.
But that's what made me so good because I didn't want to ride in the pack. So I'd go take off, you know, that's how I'd win races. I go, I didn't want to be anywhere near these people, right? You know,
Lesson learned.
so, yeah, exactly.
So you said you've never quit anything, but really, like you have never, you certainly didn't quit yourself based off of what other people told you was your prognosis or your outcome.
Well, no, on things that I wanted to do. And I mean, if I told you every time somebody said no, I couldn't do it. I mean, if I had a penny for every time I was being told I couldn't do something, I'd be a millionaire, right? You know, but I mean, to me, I'm so used to that, and I like it. I like when people, you know, kind of doubt me, right? Because you know, your best revenge when people want you to fail or they don't think you can fail is succeeding, right? That's the best thing you can do, and that's the one thing that I think I'm kind of gifted at is I don't care what other people say or their opinions. I'm going to do it anyways, right? So, and I think that's kind of a strong message I have is like, you know, listen to yourself. You know, your biggest supporter is you telling yourself what you can do. You know what you can do, right? It doesn't matter what anyone else says. And that's the thing is we have to block out the things that we don't want to hear and just bring in things that you do want to hear. There has to be like a filter system in there, right? You know?
Yes. That was worth everything right there. That was awesome. All right, so but let's get back to the superhero human stuff. Your latest that I know of, your latest big superhuman adventure was the race across America,
Correct. Yes,
and you won it.
I did.
It's a
Crazy.
3,000-mile bike race,
Correct. Yes.
and not only did you win it, aren't you're also the first female to win it? Is that
Yes.
correct?
That's right. Yeah. In 39 years in the history of the race, I don't think that there's never been a female winner. Right.
That is crazy. I
Also
mean,
crazy that I'm going to tell you something though. Like this year too with Ram, like Race Across America, it was more survival than anything else, right? Like, you know, there was only 3 finishers this year because of the temperature, the intense heat, right? You know, for my American audience, it was like 115 Fahrenheit for multiple days, and it didn't even cool down at night. Like it barely cooled down at night. I should take that back to like I don't know, it was like 35 Celsius. So what is that? Like 100 or 95. So you never really got a break, right? You know what I mean? So
gosh,
I know we've gone through hot temperatures, but at least you get some reprieve from that at nighttime. Not this time. And it didn't just that heat didn't just carry on through California and Arizona. It went through even Colorado was warm, Kansas was crazy warm, you know, Illinois, Ohio, right to the finish. Even in Maryland, right, it was like in the high hundreds, right? It was insane those to survive that kind of temperature, which killed everybody's speed, right? I'm surprised they finished it that fast because of that.
and you did it in 12 days, right?
I did it in 11 days because 12
Good
days is the
night.
cutoff. Yeah.
Okay,
But
so
we were aiming, we were aiming for 10 days. That was the goal, right? So
so the heat slowed you down.
yeah. Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's slowed down everybody, right? Like, I mean, even teams like they pulled out, right? And you know, with teams, you're rotating riders, right? You know what I mean? So that was the intensity of the heat and the conditions that we had to go through.
Do you know how many people started the race?
Well, I don't know how many teams. I think there was probably about 12 teams, and then there was 12 solo riders.
Gosh,
Yeah.
man, that's amazing. But what's more amazing than that is I read that 4 days into it, you got what's called Sherman's
Oh,
syndrome.
Shermer's neck. No, that
Sherman's
was
neck.
yeah, that was in 2011. That was 3 days in, and you know the where the neck. That was. I mean, I was a new racer. My crew was new. The head just went. It just dropped. Like I don't know. You guys know the conditions when
Yeah, can you
ultra.
explain that?
Yeah. Well, what happens with ultra riders sometimes because of the that position, right? Of holding up your neck in that kind of arrow position. It's not natural. It's not normal, right? Because your pound is still from 8 to 10 pounds. So your muscles basically just give out and your head drops. Like you can't lift it. You have no control. It's like being paralyzed from your neck up, right? You know? So how I was riding was my chin rested on the palm of my hand and my other arm controlling the bike. But, you can't ride like another, whatever, 2,000 miles that way. So, what the solution was, I have a really creative crew of 9 people, is they basically shaved me from year to year. And then the remainder of hair that I had on the top of my head, they took tensor bandage, they French braided it into my hair, and then they pulled my head back and tied it to the back of my heart rate monitor. So it's kind of like a bobblehead. But you know what? As crazy as that may seem, it actually worked. Like that's how I got across the country. And believe it or not, whenever I do round, that's how I start the race. Like if you look at the start, I'm shaved from year to year, and there my head's already pulled back and tied to my heart rate monitor right from day one. Just wait so there's no chance of the neck collapsing, because you think about that, how dangerous it is and how much it slows you down. And for most people, you have to quit the race, right? Because it's unbearable and the pain is unbelievable. It's almost worse than landing on your face at 80 kilometers an hour, you know?
So how many days in that first race was your head held up like that?
Oh, it was held up for 8 days. That's how I, and then the bandage would say, it's like, me pulling your hair and, you know what I mean, for 8 days and you're kind of leaning forward. That's how it felt like, but it was spread throughout, my head. So
Right.
you can imagine the headaches I was getting, right? You know what I mean? And the pain was just excruciating. It was unbearable. But I knew though, if I were to quit that race, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Or I could suck it up and say, you know what, at least I gave it my best shot, right? And so that's what I did. And I still ended up winning RAM in 2011, even having Schirmer's neck.
You're right. There's no quit in you whatsoever.
Well, you know what I said, that I don't care if I have to crawl across the country and if it takes me a year. I don't believe in quitting, even if it's not the outcome that you want. Like, I was fortunate enough to win my race, but honestly, even if I came in dead last and passed the cutoff time, I would have still finished. It doesn't matter, right? Because I think there's a pattern when you keep quitting things. It's just too easy to do it again and again and again. But when you go through these hard and difficult times, you reflect back when you're at those points again, right? Go, damn it, look what I did back then, right? With Schirmer's neck, or you know what I mean? So it just builds your strength and makes you stronger to tackle anything or more difficult situations that you face later on, or anything else that you choose. So it builds character when you can finish something, like I said, even if it's not the outcome that you're looking for.
How many times have you done the race across America?
This is my third time. Yeah.
And you like it enough to want to do it more than once and more than twice?
Well, the reason why I did it again in 2019 is because I didn't feel content with my finish in 2011. It was, with that kind of race, you want to do it again for the experience mentally, right? Problem was I took 8 years off the bike, right? Because I just needed a break. So, but I didn't like, sit on the couch or whatever, drink beer and gain weight or whatever. I did duathlons and marathons and whatever, but it was always in the back of my head. So I said, you know what, when I turned 50, I said, I'm going to make my comeback, right? And see if I can ride it faster. And that's the reason why I did it again in 2019. So what I did in 2018, just to make sure that I still have the ability to ride fast, I did a shorter race called Silver State. It's 500 miles. And I ended up setting a new women's record, right? Of 8 months of training. And I said, damn, you know what? I'm an old lady, but I can still ride my bike, right? So that was kind of the deciding factor of saying, yes, I'm going to try Race Across America one more time.
Leah, you're amazing. So with you're pretty much like, I'm guessing if I took out a dictionary and I looked up the word grit, your picture is going to be right there.
I don't know, maybe.
If it's not, it definitely should be. You have a book out called No Limits.
Correct. Yes.
And I guess I know a little bit what that's about after talking to you, but do you want to share a little bit about No Limits?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny, when I came back from the Middle East to pursue my cycling career, I didn't talk too much about what I did because people that I were working with were still working, right? So you don't want to, just for security reasons, and the type of work that I did. So I didn't open my mouth much, but about 7 years into my racing career, people start to find out my background, you know what I mean? And, and they thought it was so interesting. They always, but, you should write a book, you should write a book. And I said, you know what, I'd never do that in a million years. And then I started to speak. I started to, do presentations. I was a motivational speaker. And then I saw the impact, you know what I mean? That my presentations telling people, what I was going through. I said, you know what, maybe this should be a book. Maybe it will help people get through difficult times. because I can't speak to everybody. So that was kind of the deciding factor on me. Yes, I'm going to write this book. But it took us a good, like, I'm going to say almost like 7 years to complete it because it's complicated, right? We're not just dealing with cycling, we're dealing with stuff in the Middle East. So I actually took my writer, the lady who wrote the book, Lori Moger, back to the Middle East to talk to my commanders and the officers and, people in the military so she can see and feel and get different perspective of what exactly I went through. So just to make it as authentic as possible, we thought that was the best approach. And that's why it took so long to publish the book. But it was before this event. So we are going to rewrite it now to update it because a lot of things have happened from when it was published like 4 or 5 years ago to today.
Right.
Yeah.
You've also got a documentary coming out.
Yes, correct. There's 2 years ago, there's a crew said they want to follow me for the year leading up to RAM. And so we've been working on that. And again, it's not just on Race Across America. They have footage from way back when I started kickboxing and the military and police force and everything. So yeah, hopefully we're gonna release that early next year or next spring.
So for your next big adventure, you've got the Race Across America. What's your goal for that one?
I mean, the one that I just did, or
no, are you going to do it again?
Oh, I see. Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, I have to do it again. I'm on a mission to get that 10 days. You know what I mean? So that's my biggest goal. So yeah, I'm probably not going to do it next year just because of the COVID year we had last year. I still trained for Race Across America, but I didn't race. So you still have that, that load on your body. And I think just doing 3 years in a row, the fourth year might be a good year for me next year, just to do smaller races, work more on speed, refresh my mind a little bit, and come back in 2023 more ready to tackle it for the fourth time.
Are there any other targets that you've got your eyes set on?
Well, right now if the land border is open to the United States, I'd like to race in Nevada and set a new record. I have the record that I set in 2018. I want to break it this time, right? And for Raw next year, the sister race of Race Across America for next year. And again, the shorter races. And then we want to get this documentary kind of wrapped up. So that's kind of the focus right now.
So for all the energy that you use and all the training and your dedication and stuff, how do you keep yourself going? Like what's your diet like? What do you have a daily routine of just like mental preparation? Like I'm just fascinated because even just talking to you, you've got so much energy.
Thank you. Well, I'm a plant-based athlete. I don't know. I don't advertise that so much, right? But I actually stopped eating meat when I was a little child, and it had nothing to do with health reasons. It was more I loved animals, right? I'm just like I couldn't watch Bambi or any show that you see a dead. So, and so then and so that was the only reasons why. But I just found that I feel better. I think my recovery is better and I'm doing something good for the planet by not eating animals. It's just, like I said, I don't talk too much about it, but I think that has a lot to do with my energy level and how I feel. I'm just eating clean and I love being outdoors. I love spending time with my family. They're the most important for me, and just being positive, like no matter what, right? Life is too short, to dwell on things of the past or worry about things that don't really matter, because you have to enjoy life. We're only here. This is it. This is a one-time deal. That's, give it everything you got.
That is awesome. Before I let you go, and I think maybe you just did it, but if you could give anybody out there, like if you had you had 10 seconds to give somebody a word of encouragement or a word of advice, what would it be?
Don't be afraid. And who cares? There's a saying, it's none of your business what other people think of you, right? And do the things that you have a passion that make you feel alive. And you know what it is. And stop thinking about it, right? Stop talking. I don't like this, right? Don't tell anybody what you're going to do. Just damn it, do it, right? You hear people, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And 10 years later, they're still talking about the same things, right? Don't be afraid. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to be 90 sitting on your deathbed regretting what you didn't do in your life. So you think about that one, before you make a decision and you stall on anything else, man. Clock is ticking. Today.
If that doesn't make you want to move, nothing's going to make you want to move.
Exactly. Like right now, not tomorrow. Do it right now. Like start the approach of whatever it is. You know what I mean? Whatever you're thinking, what you've been thinking about, stop thinking about it. Just do it.
Leia, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for
Oh, thank you.
sharing your time with me. If people want to learn more about you or just follow you, where can they go?
Website is the best, LeahGoldstein.com or Facebook. That's probably the best way.
Right on. I will put that in the notes of the show
Excellent.
so people can find it.
Excellent.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the amazing Leia Goldstein.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great weekend.